Lord, bless this day, bless this retreat, God. Bless everyone that's here. In your son Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Our county manager, Lloyd Kirk, going to come and do some introduction.
Good morning, all. I think everybody knows everybody. And remembers everybody from yesterday. Anyway, just a reminder, the bathrooms are down there to the right again. There's a Coke machine and all there if you need something other than coffee for caffeine. We're trying to get the temperature lowered in the room so that it's a little more comfortable. I know it's awful stuffy in here. At night, they set it really high to try to conserve energy, so that when the building's not in use. So it takes a little while to cool everything down. So we'll get it there. Anyway, I hope everybody has a good day, and thanks for being here.
Once again, we are broadcasting live via YouTube. Smile.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Lloyd. I was told yesterday that I was found a little muffled through the through the mask. So today the format is going to be a little different than it was yesterday because we know that the Development Services has a lot of information to share with you today, and we want to make sure that Judy and Shana and the other folks from Development Services have an opportunity to do their presentation as fully as they would like to. So we're going to handle the questions a little bit different. We're going to treat this session as a work session of the BOC, and the questions will be, of course, posed by the commissioners because the session is for them. But the public has cards on their chairs. So if there is a question from the public, if they write it down, and Judy will walk through the agenda, identifying what's going to be covered. If on your card you can indicate what area your question is pertaining to, jot down the question. We will collect them, and when Judy opens up the questions, probably after zoning, a little bit, this is for the public, commissioners can ask questions whenever, for the public, when we open it up for questions before lunch, we have the commissioners have an opportunity, again, to ask more questions more broadly, and then Judy will have the cards from the public and be able to respond to them, or whoever is appropriate to respond. Any questions about the change in format? Does it seem like it would work?
Yeah.
My only concern is people that may they feel like they're being silent.
Say it again, say the last part.
My only concern is that citizens may feel like they're being silent because they had the opportunity on yesterday. That's my only concern.
We just know that the volume of Judy's presentation is perhaps greater than the material that was covered yesterday, and we want to make sure that there's that opportunity. Because again, as we talk, this is a work session for the commission. And you can say something. So, Frank, if you want to talk about just review the ground rules a little more, we've added a couple.
Let me, before I get into to the ground rules, we added two more by special request, and so we want to share those with you. I'm going to go back a couple of years when I was at Carl Vinson Institute, do classes for the elected official classes. Those classes were very general. We talked about high-level stuff, but we never particularly talked about specific counties or cities. These retreats are a little bit different because it also is information sharing, but it's information sharing as it applies to Newton County. So they are it's a way that commissioners can be brought up to date on new policies, new procedures, how things are calculated, to prepare you so that when you're asked by folks in your constituency, you can answer those questions or have a good idea, and also understand who to go to find specific information. And it gives you a chance to ask questions for clarity on your part. So that's the main reason for that. So I wanted to say that. So, you know, what we did at ACCG, at Carl Vincent was very high level. And you were supposed to come back to the county and then you have another level, which is that this is the more specific level. So any questions? So here are the ground rules as we had them before, allowing people to finish their thought before you start speaking. Listen with intention. In other words, listen for understanding. Because if we're going to chat, I need to understand what you are saying, as well as you understand what I'm saying. You need to be open-minded, especially in the learning atmosphere. Be non-biased, suspend prior judgment, actions speak louder than words, and the two that we added were limit side conversations. You know, some of it is happening up front, some of it in the back, but what happens, that becomes very distracting for folks who are trying to listen. And the last ones that we have respectful regard for one another. Basically, no personal attacks. We're all here for the same reason. So if you start your statement with you, that's probably leading to an attack. Questions? Also, what we will, we have a process that we will be able to collect the information from the audience. And did you want to speak? No. Okay. So we will capture their questions. We want them to also focus on the hearing of what's happening, and then we'll look at how we get the answers to them. But their questions will be captured. I submitted this to you.
I accept it. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Today's presentation, I wasn't able to be here yesterday as the majority of all of your departments, we have work that we need to do. So, but I was asked to be able to be here today, and let me say that it is an honor to be able to share with you what our department does. And I'm going to try to make this as interactive as I possibly can. The first thing I want to do is kind of go over our agenda. Let me give you a little bit of tools that you have sitting there on your table. And specifically for our commissioners who prefer to have these on a digital format, I do have those. I just did not get the rest of the presentations loaded, but I have you all a thumb drive. So not only will you have the printed copies here, you'll also have a thumb drive that has lots of memory. So if you need to add other things to it, you'll have your flash drive. But on your tables, you're gonna see a very, very thick book. If everyone can look, this nice, large, thick binder here, those are all the ordinances that our department regulates. Now, I don't plan on going over every one of those. That's a lot of information, and it is printed front and back. But just to let you know that is the tools, some of the tools that we use. The other notebook that you have on your desk is actually the presentation, and in that you'll find your agenda. So the part one of our morning, we want to do a good overview of our department. We're going to be discussing the branches of the department, such as zoning, land development, building permits, business license, and code enforcement. We will also talk about other regulatory programs that our department has to manage or we're responsible for, whether it's a federal program or a state program. And then we're going to take a break. There'll be questions also throughout, as Frank and Allison explained earlier. Commissioners, please feel free to let me know when you have a question. And then we certainly want our audience to be able to participate. But touching just briefly on that, what you're going to learn today is what our department does as we go through the comprehensive plan. We have lots of required meetings with our public. So the public will have a very, very large voice in being able to express their concerns. And if it is something we can regulate or change, we can certainly make that. So don't think today is the last time that the citizens have an opportunity. They'll have ample opportunity as we move through some of the different programs that we do. Then after the break, we're going to do part 2, which is our zoning module. And in the zoning, we're going to cover what is planning our futures. And we have a couple of tools that allow us to do that, and that's a comprehensive plan and a future land use plan. And then once you get your planning part of it done, then what is your zoning of the land and what kind of uses can go on that property? We also offer things such as conditional use permits and variances. We do conditions of zoning sometimes when someone comes before a board and they're asking to do something and the board seems to think it's a pretty good idea, but maybe we need to think about, should there be a fence up there? Maybe they should be set back further from the neighbor on the property next door to them because what they want to do might impact them a little, but still it's a good use and we might want to move forward with it. We're also going to talk about uses that are allowed by rights. One of the things I hope to help you understand today is that land use laws favor the property owner. That doesn't mean we have to accept everything someone wants to do, but the way land use laws are written, it is always in favor of a property owner. And then we have tools that we use in zoning petitions that help us decide, is it worth the rights of the property owner, or is it more of an impact to our community, and can we legally turn down that request? And then we're going to talk a little bit about development regulations, again, questions throughout, and then we're going to have lunch. We'll come back from lunch and we're going to go to responsibility. And this is where we're going to talk a little bit about what the government's responsible for, what the private industry is responsible for, and what economic development is responsible for. And then after that portion, we're going to move into the building permits. And I have asked my building inspectors to be here this afternoon. Well, I will do a very, very brief overview, and then we're going to more or less open that up for y'all to be able to ask some questions. And then the very final part of our morning is going to be, our day is going to be code enforcement. And that's going to be very similar. I'll give a very brief presentation. The code officers will be here this afternoon, and you'll be able to ask them some questions. So, again, I hope to make this very interactive. One of the things that I would like to also remind everyone is that the goal of our Development Services Department is to help execute our strategic plan. Our strategic plan, Strategy A, cultivate a culture of trust. And often when we have citizens that don't understand what our department does or why we have to do what we do, then that creates some unrest, sometimes animosity. Sometimes it can be a positive thing or it can be a negative thing. But the goal is to explain to you as commissioners and our public what is that culture of trust? What can we control? What gets us into legal concerns or legal battles? And what are other agencies that might be able to offer some solutions to what the citizens have concerns over? Strategy B, enhance quality of life. Well, development's all about enhancing quality of life, and there's lots of tools that we can use to get there. Strategy C, create a framework for strategic economic development. And that is probably one of the biggest items that this department covers, is doing a framework. We're a regulatory department. Everything we do is because of rules and regulations. Strategy D, strengthen and expand facilities and infrastructure to meet the needs of the public. Sometimes we learn that when we grow, we have growing pains. And how do we help relieve those growing pains? And then finally, strategy E, provide for a safe and, Shannon, you're writing out, safe and secure community. I apologize, we had to write them, I didn't have those. But to provide for a safe and secure community. And there are a lot of things that the tools that we do, such as street lights in residential districts. That helps create, if someone's coming home and you've got the pooch and you need to walk him down the road, well, if you've got sidewalks and if you've got street lights, that helps create a safe environment for that. Now, Shana passed out a while ago to each of the commissioners and to the county manager and chairman a little sheet of paper. And if you don't mind, if each of you would just, and I'm going to start here with the county manager, just read me what your little yellow sheet of paper said.
9 plus 0 equals 9.
Chairman?
2 plus 7 equals 9.
8 plus 1 equals 9.
Commissioner Cowan?
3 plus 6 equals 9.
Commissioner Mason?
4 plus 5 equals 9.
Okay, so we all got to 9, right? Did we all get there the same way?
No.
Well, sometimes there are many paths to get to what we want to do. It's about us coming together. Our end goal is the same. It's about us coming together to get to that end goal. So today what I hope to do as well is to help you learn what is 9. And 9 is the theoretical thing that we all want to today strive to be. But again, our goals need to be similar so then we can regulate the laws that you set and the other laws fairly to everyone in the county. So to start with the first point of the or the first presentation point, the development services, an overview of our department. Again, I don't know what I'd do without my right-hand person here. The development services team, to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of who we are. I'm Judy Johnson, I'm the director. Here's my planner and my senior member of staff, Shana Applewhite. Our zoning administrator is Ms. Tracy Hernandez. We have a civil engineer, floodplain, and MS4 manager. That is a vacant position at this time. We have extended the job. We hope to have that filled very soon. We also have a stormwater tech. His name's Jordan Furman. We have an NPDES. That's a regulates the land, a dirt officer, and that is Ray Spencer. He has been with the county on the 20th of this month, 20 years. He knows his job. We rely on him for a lot of our land use concerns. Our building inspectors are Mr. Bobby Copenny and Mr. Almond Knight. We have another position which is being advertised, but it is open at this time. You will be able to meet Mr. Copenny and Mr. Knight this afternoon. We also have code enforcement. Code enforcement, we have lead officer Tiana Combs. Officer Cole Adams, and Officer Twana Davis. We have a total of 4 positions, but right now we have 1 position on hold. Those officers will be here this afternoon as well. We have an office manager that's also titled Administrative Coordinator, and that's Ms. Crystal Dooley. And then our administrative team, and I put them last, but y'all, they're our first line of defense. That's who primarily answers our phone. That's who's going to open the door to the customers. That's our first point of contact. And when I used to work in the restaurant industry as a server, sometimes the server would get beat up because the food was bad. Well, did the server cook the food? So again, it's about realizing who your front line is. These ladies work extremely hard. We have Ms. Sandra Morgan as our general kind of receptionist and covers other positions in the department as necessary for administrative help. Ms. LaToya Williams is our business license clerk. Ms. Denise Tuckman is our building permit clerk. And we have a temporary data entry young lady named Ayana Ramos, who's doing an excellent job for us. So what do we do? Development Services, as I mentioned earlier, is a regulatory department. Our department regulates the local legislation that you set. We also have to regulate all of those ordinances that we gave you in that book. And I will have to say, I put a little note at the bottom, lists may not be all inclusive. Sometimes that as development happens, for our community, we're not on the coastline, so we don't have to really worry about marshland. However, there could be other water regulations that don't come up on a daily basis as we start developing that we may have to enforce as well. So anyway, that's a general list of all of our ordinances that we are required to look over. So if someone comes in and I want to develop a property, or I want a building permit, or I want a business license, this is where we go to find out what has this board set as law that allows the person requesting to do what they want to do. We have a unified development ordinance, and we'll go over these much later in our presentation throughout the day. But we have a unified development ordinance, and that includes your zoning ordinance, your development regulations, and your water resources. We also have an impact fee ordinance. Our county collects impact fees. We'll go over that in a little bit. There's a flood damage prevention ordinance, a soil and erosion and sedimentation ordinance, a timber harvesting ordinance, traffic control in relations to timber harvesting. We have our watershed protections for both Cornish Creek and at some point, if the need was there for the county, the Bear Creek Reservoir, which has been temporarily put on hold. But again, we've invested a lot of time and development into assigning an area if the need arose, so it could come back at y'all's discretion. We also do, I put the historic preservation ordinance and the firearms ordinance. Now, the sheriff's office regulates the firearms ordinance, but we get a lot of people who will call and ask if I can shoot a gun, or if I can, am I in violation, or someone. A lot of times our department is a catch-all because we do a lot of things with the community. But again, if it's specific to the firearms, we would have to send them back to the sheriff's office on that. Building permits, building and building regulations, it's called the Administrative Procedures Ordinance. That is an ordinance that is under review. We may be able to get into that a little bit during our building time, but it is under review. A lot of the questions and concerns that come up with that is, are we enforcing enough? And what is our liability if we decide to do more than our minimum code? The other things is a solar and wind ordinance. We have alternative energy. We have people right now wanting to put solar panels on the roofs of their houses. They want to go green infrastructures. We have some industries that are looking at doing maybe some large solar farms. We have Snapping Shoals has a current solar farm out on Highway 11. Again, just moving toward what's gonna grow our community. What are the things that our citizens want? What are the things that we see as needs? What are the things that will help us prepare for our future? We have the business license and occupational tax ordinance. We also have an ordinance for moving and placing buildings throughout the county. There's an alcohol ordinance, the sale of non-traditional paraphernalia and the use of e-cigarettes. We have regulations for that. We have regulations for, it says marijuana on here, actually it's the synthetic marijuana. We have an adult entertainment ordinance, a body craft and tattoo regulations, massage and spa establishment ordinance, property maintenance. That's where primarily our code enforcement comes from, is that property maintenance, litter control, and solid waste management and nuisance abatement ordinance. And we have a community redevelopment ordinance, also known as a blighted property ordinance. You may be more familiar with that term. And then we have the noise ordinance and regulations for that. On top of that, we also have other rules from other regulatory agencies. If you want to do a daycare, you have to have a license from the start. That's a program that's through the state, where we can't issue a building permit or a business license until you have confirmed that you have met all of the requirements from the state. We have the Department of Community Affairs. We work with them a lot on things. For our personal care homes, for community living arrangements, for adult daycares, for the CIE and short-term work program, which we will also discuss here in just a little bit. Secretary of State. If I am a licensed electrician and I want a business license in this county, I have to provide proof that I'm an actual licensed electrician. If I want to pull a building permit, I have to provide proof. Now, there are property owner rights, and again, we'll discuss that in building this afternoon. But there are property owners who can pull their own permits. But if it's a rental property and you're not living in it, or if it's a commercial property where other people are coming in, then you have to have a licensed person to be able to do that trade work for you. We also, Department of Agricultural, all of our convenience stores have to have a Department of Ag license in order to sell the food. Environmental health, we get with them on the issuance of building permits if you're on septic or if you're wanting to open a restaurant. GCIC and GAPS, we have to fingerprint for alcohol license. And this is we have our own GCIC number. We had to go to training with the acronyms and departments. But anyway, we had to go to training up in Atlanta, of where all of us had to give the blood of our firstborn child in order to be able to qualify to see people's criminal histories reports. Department of Revenue, if you're going to do an alcohol license, the Department of Revenue is where you would need to also get a license from. FEMA, that's our flood management, and I'm sure y'all are kind of familiar with those. We've had several things going on in which FEMA, GEMA, and all of those other wonderful agencies offer assistance to local governments, but they also require us to do certain regulations in order to have that assistance. We also have the responsibility to regulate for state and federal agencies such as Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Commission and EPD as a local issuing authority. And then Northeast Regional Commission, we do our DRIs if the project is so large that it meets a certain threshold because of the area that we're in. We're required to work with Northeast Georgia in order to submit a DRI. And a DRI gives a regional review of an impact. When we first had Facebook come in at Stanton Springs, they had to submit a DRI to the state. When we had Lidl come in, Lidl had to submit a DRI to the state. So this got a comprehensive state review. Other services that we regulate, and I'm trying to pick up the pace here, guys. Other services that we regulate, planning and zoning department, we have a comprehensive plan, a future land use plan. We do rezoning requests, conditional use permits, administrative use, special exceptions, variances, the list goes on and on and on. We also do business license zoning approval, temporary commercial, temporary special events. We do building permit reviews, and we do approval for zoning requirements. Under land development, which is where my wonderful planner shines, she helps guide us with a minor plat, a subdivision of land. She helps guide us through preliminary plats and concept plans and land disturbance permits for residential development and commercial developments, final plats. She also collects bonds. When you're coming in and you're doing a development and you're putting in a new road, the county has a requirement to put a bond on that road for a period of time. So during the construction, we're able to get that road where it meets the code. So in hopes that our roads do not have failures, that is then a burden on the taxpayers, because then we need to improve those roads. So again, we do a lot of things within our department. On building permits, we issue new residential, new commercial, we remodel, we rebuild, we do additions, we do accessory structures, I want a new service upgrade because I want to add a whole bunch of electrical in here. Well, you need to come get a permit in order to do that. We also assist the city of New Bern and the city of Mansfield for their building permits. Most of the other local municipalities have their own departments, but these governments and areas are so small that they do not have a building department. We assist, we have an IGA with them to assist with that. Business license, we have home occupations, commercial license, agricultural license, alcohol license, a personal care home, a daycare facility, non-traditional paraphernalia, and massages spa license. We also regulate stormwater. We're required by EPD to submit an annual report to them. And it's not just submit a report, you can't pencil with it. You have to go out and actually inspect the facilities and to see if these are working properly. I want to spend just a small moment on the MS4 program. Most everyone is familiar with what we call a detention pond. And detention ponds are found in subdivisions, on commercial sites, on private property. Some of the detention ponds, the county is responsible for making sure they're cleaned. Some of them are private ownership. Some of them are HOAs. And if we go out and do an inspection and we find a failure or a flaw, we're required by the EPD to issue notice. Now, if I'm a landowner and I didn't realize I had a detention pond on my property, and I don't have an extra $50,000 sitting around, or let's just say it was $5,000. You know, I mean, let's show a raise of hands of how many could afford $500 if you weren't expecting it. I mean, so it's an impact, but we have to work through those, because when these ponds or lakes or detention areas are not working properly, that means our water is not filtering. And so again, we regulate this. We regulate if we've got floodplain, and this county is peppered with plenty of areas that have natural resource challenges. You know, they're also their benefits, their gems. We've got people who now love to kayak in the lazy Yellow River. That's an avenue where we can provide recreation. What does recreation do? It enhances quality of life. So again, everything we do circles back around, circles back around. Our MS4 program, last year our engineer, our MS4 manager, did a program where he went out and he presented this to the board, but he went out and did lots of different inspections throughout the year. And this is kind of how it works. The first step is to do a site inspection. then you're gonna send a letter to the owner with the findings. If it's a county facility, we send that, email request for them down to Public Works. So then your Public Works Department gets involved, and they go out and they make the necessary changes. Then we document a timeline for repair, and then the owner completes the repair, and then the stormwater manager approves the repair. And this goes on and on. Primarily, our MS4 is in our urbanized area, which is the west side of the county. But all development, and as we grow and expand, all development will fall under the need. If we have a dam, just because it's in a very rural area on 500 acres, still does not mean that the EPD does not require us to make sure it's functioning properly. Here's some pictures of some different, there's Lockwall. We had an issue there, not issue, but we had an opportunity for them to improve their infrastructure. We had Orchard Park, Round Way, which was the Board of Education, Westminster Subdivision, Walmart over on Salem Road, and Oak Manor. Every one of those were repaired last year. We were able to put that in our report, send that information up, and at the end of the day, our goal is simple. We need clean water for our future. The annual CIE, and I will be very, very quick to go through this so we can open it up for some questions before we go to break at 10:15. So our annual CIE, short-term work program. This is a plan because we collect impact fees. We have to submit an annual report to be approved. It comes before this board. We give you a list of our short-term work programs. We're going to throw a lot of acronyms out there today, but ask me afterwards. I'll try to get you a Cliff Note cheat sheet. But our capital improvement element is short-term work program. It's an annual report required by the Department of Community Affairs due to the fact that we collect impact fees. The impact fee program for Newton County began in 2005. Newton County chose 3 buckets, 3 areas that this money would be distributed to. One bucket is transportation, very important. Every time that we can find ways to fund transportation, it takes it off of the county. And although I cannot say that I'm a proponent of taxes, there are things that come before this board, and y'all as a group decided we would offer it to our citizens for the T-SPLOST. T-SPLOST didn't work. Didn't get voted through. Citizens had their right, they had their voice. But at the end of the day, what that program would have provided was a lot of necessary road improvements that would have taken the burden of you having to tax everyone in the county. We get a lot of people coming in here traveling, visitors, they pay taxes. All of us, if we want to go up to the Mall of Georgia, well, COVID has been a different year, but if we want to go to the Mall of Georgia, or if we want to go eat here or eat there, we're going to spend our tax dollars the same way with people coming into here. Our square is filled up regularly with people coming in just because it's a short drive. Maybe they live around here, it's a short drive, and they can come in and see our movie industry, or they're able to see some of the other things that we're able to offer. We've got a lot of great natural resources up at Lake Varner. We have a beautiful facility up there where families can go and hold a birthday party outside. We have, oh Lord, my mind just went completely blank. But again, let me try to move forward instead of try to pontificate here. The following document is a portion of a report. So the way the CIE works is that there are certain elements of this that has to be submitted, and we do what's called a short-term work program. Now, mind you, this is draft form. I'm giving you the raw, yes, sir.
I wanted to add, because I know you were talking about the 3 buckets.
Yes.
When you spoke about transportation, can you elaborate just briefly on how how this area affects the library and recreation.
Oh, I'm so sorry, you're right, I didn't
That's okay.
necessarily go to the other two buckets, did I? We were just filling up the transportation. So we have three buckets. A percentage of the impact fees that we collect go to transportation, a percentage goes to the library, and a percentage goes to recreation. Now, because of the impact fee program, you're limited in how you can spend those funds. Those funds can be spent on what's called a community improvement. So let's say that at Kroll and Brown Ridge Road, that's one of the intersections that is skewed and has a lot of traffic, it has a lot of backup. Well, we could potentially identify that as where we could spend impact fees for transportation improvements. For recreation improvements, it's not quite like your SPLOST. Your SPLOST is granted because you've identified specific projects that you would like to see move forward. For impact fees, we paved the Cricket Frog Trail. That was a community improvement. More than one area, more than one person, it's a multi-use where everyone would be able to. The same way when we built Denny Dobbs, not Denny Dobbs Park, but the library over at Denny Dobbs Park.
Porter Memorial.
Porter Memorial, yes sir. That was a community improvement. Yes, was it located in a certain district, but there was a void in that district for that type of program. So that is what we chose to do. Now that bucket is still in the negative. So what we're having to do now with that is that as we collect, you pay that bucket back, and then when we get enough, we will offer the library a volume of new books, or whether it's e-books or printed books, whatever would fit their needs to help guide them. So here is our list of different kinds of projects, and I'll be honest, I don't have my glasses on today, and it's very challenging seeing to begin with. But the way the program works is you're going to be given a list of different kinds of projects. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I want to ask
That's
another
okay.
question, because you brought up a great point when you talked about the impact fees. As we collect them, we'll be able to provide them with services that they need, like e-books, etc. So how does that actually work? Because I think right now they are in a need for some things such as that. So how would we be able to utilize this bucket to be able to resolve that need?
Okay, well, I did not bring the where we're at right now in paying back the expense that it cost. It was a multi-million-dollar project to build the library. So at this point, we would not be able to further extend that. We would have to wait till that bucket gets to a positive balance. And I think in this report, we've identified $50,000 as our first wave of a project. Once we get $50,000, we go to the school board, not the school board, we go to the library, we let them know that fees have been collected. Here are the limitations of what you can spend it on, what would you like to do with it? And then once we start getting that positive bucket, then we'll add another line item. Because if you'll notice in your little chart there, it's not for everything to finish this year. It's not for everything to finish next year. Not everything on that chart is impact fees. Some of it is other funding things, but the short-term work program, which is part of our capital improvement element, the short-term work program kind of sets a guide for what do we see, what are our capital projects that we need to work on in the future. And I know there's other tools that you use as well, but this short-term work program, every one of your other local governments, they have a short-term work program as well. And it is beneficial when we all get together and make sure what this board's deciding to do correlates with what City of Covington's wanting to do. We don't all have to do the same thing, but we don't want to be in conflict with one another. Like Porterdale, they do a lot of recreation is kind of their real big thing that they kind of promote. So is there ways for us to utilize that same thing? And I think we put a couple of yacht or boat launches in on the Yellow River that may feed further down, and then you come out in Porterdale, and or you can go further down to Lake Jackson. So did that kind of answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, do we, I mean, I don't know if this is something that we would know, utilizing that process that you just mentioned to get to that $50,000 or get to that positive status. Is there a specific time frame that it takes to get there?
That depends on your development, your building permits. So a couple of years ago, the Board of Commissioners looked really hard on the fact that our impact fees were set two different ways. They were set for residential, new residential homes, not if you want to build a garage, but if you're building a new residential home that's never been on a piece of property, or if you're doing commercial development. So there were two ways that those buckets go. Under commercial, it was just for transportation. It didn't fund also recreation and the library. But a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, the board came together and recognized that we were not getting as many commercial developments as we could because impact fees were a hurdle that a lot of people didn't want to go over. They could go to Rockdale County where they don't collect impact fees, or they could go to Henry County, or they could go to some of these other places that didn't impose these. And because, as you all know, when we want to grow our tax base, and I'm talking just at high level, just trying to be practical, when you're wanting to grow your tax base and you grow your residential tax base, well, that equals needs. You know, when people move here, we all move here, and then we have the needs for the government. So when you start talking about having to raise taxes, that impacts everyone who put you in this place, everyone. So sometimes it makes hard decisions because, like last year, people lost jobs, a lot of things went upside down. So if in order to balance the needs of the people, you raise taxes, that's a burden. So the impact fee, but if you develop commercial and industrial, that's a positive thing that comes back into your community. Their needs aren't near as high for services. So the Board of Commissioners decided to take the impact fee on commercial and industrial and bring it down to 0%. And we have greatly grown our non-residential base by that. But if you want to build a new home, then there is a percentage. It's not just a new single family. There's a percentage if it's a townhome. There's a percentage if it is, it's a little different if it is an apartment. So every one of these new residential units have an impact on us. So we want to put that charge on the builder, the developer, to help offset and provide some of the services that the impact fees can do. So that help?
Yeah.
Okay. And what I'm going to do is 10:09, so.
Yes, I just wanted to mention while we're on this, you see funding sources up there, those are very fluid because things change. And so while we may have something may have been originally intended to be impact fees, it could be that some of those projects can be paid for. We may have general fund money, or there may be other ways to fund those. So that column in particular is pretty fluid as far as the funding source.
Yeah, it's all of your, not all, but as many of the capital improvement programs that we can put in there. And let's say that we can qualify and get GDOT sometimes will come through and offer, well, we might have scheduled it for impact fees, but if GDOT's going to do it, well, let's go ahead and let them do that, and let's take the funds that were allocated for that and put them into another project.
Right.
So yes, so the short-term work program is much more comprehensive than just showing your impact fees, but you do have to have projects on there that you can use your impact fees for, or else we're not being legitimate while we're collecting them. You can't collect them without a reason to collect them in an end use. And with that being said, we are very, very close to 10:15, so I want to open it up if there's any other questions for the first part. Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am.
And you did state that the impact fees are generated through the developer.
We collect them, yes, sir. When someone applies for a new residential building permit, as part of their fees, that fee is applied then. They pay it when we issue the permit.
So any permit, residential, commercial, all of that?
New residential only at this time, new residential units, because remember we don't, an accessory structure, you wouldn't, the impact is when you have new families moving in as far as on the residential side.
The impact fee was set at the beginning of the imposition of the fee, the ordinance. I believe it was $17.50 per single family home, and that's not changed. In order to change it, you've got to go back, redo your impact fee ordinance, and then you have to provide a whole new set of calculations and whatnot on how you arrived at that fee. So it's been $17.50 and stayed at $17.50
Since 2005, and there's again a percentage that goes into each of the buckets. Not all of the percentages, and we'll go more over that because the new CIE report has to come before this board. We have to have a public hearing. So you're going to see that document. You'll be able to, if your constituents have questions, they'll be able during that public hearing to come up and ask the questions about what they see on that report that we've done. And then you'll also see, let me just point out, in everything in blue, those are things we've accomplished. And those fall off from year to year. So we do see progress being made. It just sometimes feels not fast enough. And Commissioner Cowan, I think you may have had a question.
Two things. One, on your detention ponds, do we have an inventory of those in the county?
We do. That is actually coordinated through our GIS department, and so sometimes when new infrastructure gets added, then we have to get, because it's about coordinates. You have to know it's not just a detention pond, but it may be an underground pipe that feeds into a pond. We have to know where each of those items are, the storm drains that you see in your subdivisions and stuff.
Are those county properties, or do they belong to the subdivision?
They belong to a mixture of people. Back in the mid-2000s, the county went through a time where we wanted all the green space to be dedicated back to the county and not to the HOA. So we had a lot of green space. But with that comes the responsibility of managing the storm ponds. So now we have amended that, and any new development, it has to be set up through their HOA. And all we can, as a department, hope is that developer and that builder, when they pass the baton on to the HOA, that they've informed them of what, that's not our responsibility to inform them. That is a civil, private matter.
Okay, the other question I had is, the rates for impact fees have not been adjusted since 2005, is that what I heard?
Yes, sir.
So, if those were raised now, would that have a slowing effect on residential, you think?
And yes, it could, but it could also, and again, any extra program we want to do, we have to remember we got to have the time, people, and resources to manage that. But to your point, it could be time to dip our toe in the water and start looking at.
I mean, if doing away with impact fees on the commercial had the effect of generating more commercial growth in the county, then the logic would be if you raise the rates on residential, that may slow that down. Is that correct?
Well, and that could be a cause and effect for sure, but the way impact fees are set, we're going to have to, it's through a formula, and we have to prove what is our need. And truly, our need may be greater than it was in 2005, So, you know, again, not opposed to reevaluating that. I would certainly not suggest doing away with them because we need those.
No.
We need recreation. We need,
Right, I wouldn't
yes.
do away with it, but I'm talking about raising them on residential to help, to basically slow it down.
So instead of 1750, maybe 1850. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
So that-
and again, it's a formula, that's how we got to where it was to begin with, but it could be time to reevaluate, what does that number look like today?
Well, question I have, first of all, you for being there, this question that I have is, where's most growth at? Where's most housing being built at? Is it a certain district or?
Well, where your houses generally, where your new development generally goes, is where you have infrastructure, and there's a lot of different infrastructure, but if you are a lot that has county water and sewer,
Get higher density.
then you can get, you don't, like, if you're on septic, if you're out in the county and you're on septic, your lot has to be a certain size. So that does, to your point,
Yes, ma'am.
your city that has all of that infrastructure develops and develops densely. And then when we started getting inventory, development here, it started going like, it just like, on back of each other. Our ordinance requires if you're within 1,500 feet of sewer, you have to tap into the sewer. So a lot of it would have gone this way.
Yes, ma'am.
It's
Right.
not a lot of it in the north, because sewer just hasn't been pulled to the north. It's not a lot of sewer down in the southern part. We had a conversation about over at Highway 212 and Brown Ridge Road and the limitations of being able to even develop commercially there. You have some on the outskirts here in District 5, and we now have some limited that is a little further down because of Stanton Springs.
So, who are we sending the most permits to, in which district? I understand about the cities in the growth, you know.
I would have to pull that number, Commissioner, to be for sure, but just as a gut answer, I would probably say 2 and 3. District 2 and 3 in their areas here have seen the most growth. Up here, not much growth. Down here, not much growth.
So your development's gonna follow your water and sewer.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so you're saying that there's a possibility of going up from, 750 to 1850? Then you're talking about raising the impact fees in district, but 3 and 2 or whatever.
Well,
It'll be
anyone who wants
everywhere,
to do a
Well,
new home.
in town, most in town or in the town of Austin, they would be getting impact fees.
Correct, you're within the city limits, no
That's
sir.
correct. So we talking about in the most unincorporated
Yeah.
areas.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And most time impact fees, to my knowledge, is spent where there's most need, and most of it is in probably those 2 districts, or 3 districts.
Yes, sir, and we did briefly, while you were getting your pearly whites, played earlier. We were able to briefly talk about how impact fees are spent. Yes, the same way when we built the library, and I'm not sure if you walked in, you know, the library, there was a vacuum. Yes, sir, you were certainly
Yeah, I
here,
remember that.
but there was a vacuum over here for that. So the county decided the best placement would be for this, but our impact fees, they can be spent in some local areas if there is a need that is broad enough that it helps more than one citizen. You know, impact fees are to help offset the cost on this board to provide certain services.
Yes, ma'am.
The other thing to remember about impact fees is you have to establish what's called a service area. In this county, it was adopted as the entire unincorporated part of the county was the service area. So regardless of where the money is collected, it can be spent anywhere in the county. Now, some places adopt a particular service, adopted impact fees to serve particular service areas. In let's just say, District Two was identified for discussion, then all the money that was collected, and then you could have only collected money in District Two, and all the money that was collected would have had to have been spent in District Two. So, but Newton County, and I think wisely so, identified the entire county as the service area so that there would not be a restriction on where you can spend your money, because not knowing what the future would bring in terms of how development was going to happen, where it was going to happen, and what were going to be the impacts. I mean, when they were adopted in 2005, I don't really think the county probably envisioned a Takeda and a Facebook. So that really, once those things mature a little bit more, I think you'll see some things shift. And so, so that's the thing to remember about our, now if we were to go back again and revisit that, that may be part of, that we need to redo a whole thing, but that's why they did it in 2005.
So, Louis, to your point, if that was the case, wherever those impact fees were generated, that's where you would develop, would that cause us to begin to develop more in other areas of the county if we were to do that? Because what would happen is you're only going to see development in the area where it's growing. In the areas where it's not growing, you're not going to see development. So that would that would encourage us to want more development in other areas, so that we have a complete county of development and not just more development on one side and not the other.
Right, but you gotta get the water and sewer over there.
Yes, the
That's what I was gonna say.
infrastructure. The infrastructure.
Really, the development is really sort of the aftermath or the cause of infrastructure. And further sewer development or development of sewer lines would have to go to also developing treatment plants, additional treatment plants, and additional either spray fields or a place to either that or to be able to release it right back into the rivers. And I don't know whether there's been some argument back and forth about whether spray fields are more beneficial to the environment than releasing the water, than releasing the wastewater back into the water system, because it takes so much longer for the water, spray field to get back into the general water supply when we need the water. So it's sort of a big argument.
Have we set an infrastructure plan in place? Have we begun to really look at that and say, how do we begin to develop that infrastructure in other areas where we don't have it?
Well, I think, the Water and Sewer Authority is a distribution system, a collection system for sewer. Part of that too goes back to your comprehensive plan, whether or not, one of the reasons we don't have a whole lot of development in the northern part of the county is there's a lot of rock, and it makes it difficult to build. I mean, it's almost impossible for septic systems, but even just the idea of building. So that's one issue. The second, another issue is just whether or not, you want the entire county to be developed. I think there are, some of the citizens don't want that. Some of the citizens want to live in rural areas. And
we're half and half.
Yeah.
Half urban, half rural.
So there's always that dynamic too. I mean, whether, do we want to be as highly developed as, say, some of the other counties that are out there, like other metro counties like DeKalb or Clayton or, but the first thing is infrastructure, whether or not there's a plan, whether or not there's the ability to
we should, even if we do wanna maintain some level of rule, specifically designate where that's going to be versus, hey, we're gonna develop this particular part of the county, but we're not gonna develop this part of the county, so that we still give those options.
And that's really, that's what we've got in the comp plan, but you need to start talking about the comp plan and see how the comp plan was developed and what was put in place so that's what I have to say.
So, if I can, because we're right at break and I see that obviously we're needing break because we're having people kind of, let me very quickly, we did have one question from our audience. Well, it's actually two questions, but let me read that out. I'm going to give it a best stab, and then I'm going to rely on our trusty county manager. So the question is about FEMA, and the citizen wants to know, is FEMA operated out of the Development Services Department? No, it is not. It is a state agency. We are required to do certain things, have certain regulatory rules and regulations because of the laws that FEMA enforces. But we're not we don't even have a member in our department that works for FEMA. We report to FEMA. The second part of that question is, does FEMA have a provision for paying for funerals if a person dies from COVID? And this is, I try to read as much as I can. I'm a sponge for knowledge. I enjoy that. But I have heard that there's a lot of different programs out there, but I would not be able to speak intelligently. I don't know if someone in here does have that information. What I might encourage, yes, sir.
They do.
They do?
If someone passed from March of last year up until now, if you submit the death certificate and it said that that person died from COVID-19, then we will reimburse you for the whole funeral if you submit the death certificate and the price to pay to bury that person.
And not to put another department who's obviously not here to say yay or nay or defend themselves, but I will say that our EMA department works very closely with a lot of these programs for reimbursement and so forth.
EMA?
That EMA, yes. Emergency Management, which is Mr. Jody Nolan. Now, he may or may not be able to help someone with this, but apparently, as Mr. Shepherd, as Mr. Shepherd has let us know, that is an option. So as a leader in the community, if your people are asking for that, I don't know that we have, if Mr. Nolan with EMA was not able to provide at least a little high level on that, that might be something that you could get with another community member that might have some knowledge on deaths or COVID or, yes, sir.
I was just recommend that you contact Georgia's manager, because we would not handle that locally. Georgia Emergency Management Association, and they would be able to direct you. I'm sure if there's a program out there that's sponsored by FEMA and probably funds through the state, they probably would know. The other thing about FEMA is, with FEMA, particularly with development, they develop the flood, two things. They have maps that show floodplain and floodways and establish what's called the FIRM maps, flood insurance rate maps. And what those do basically establish whether you're in the X zone or a V zone. And all of that has to do with how much the possibility of water you're getting flooded and then to what extent, and also establish the elevations of the land that you're on. So that's the focus of what Development Services does with them, plus with the water quality in terms of the stormwater management.
I think we have another question.
I have a quick question. Can you expound on, I know our county manager mentioned that the developer pays $17.50 per single family home. you know, I have a lot of real estate professionals in my area, and they mentioned it was a little bit more based on everything they have to pay per home. Can you expound on those
On
various
what fees we collect and
Yes,
what they may have to, yes, ma'am.
It's really more than $17.50, so can you
Yes, ma'am.
expound on that?
So the way, if you're coming in for a new residential building permit, and we'll just talk about that one for this exercise. There are items you have to bring in to get the permit, which is either a sewer tap receipt or a septic permit. So that's a cost outside of our department that you had to go pay. And to be honest, I don't know what that fee is, but you have to have it when you want to build a new home. You also have to have a water tap receipt. Or if you're in an area that doesn't have that, you have to have a well, and digging a well is about $3,000 to $5,000. I've done one of those before. So those are fees that are outside of. You also, if you're in a platted subdivision built after 2000 and after 2000, is it September, Shana, maybe? For the ENS, yes. So you may have to have, let's say that you're on just a big piece of land, but you got a lake and you want to build your house close to the lake. Well, if you're within 200 feet of state waters, you're going to have an ENS plan. So that means the civil engineer has to draw that up for you. Or if you're in a platted subdivision such as Westminster or Bailey Glen, all of those have to have an ENS plan. So you have to have an engineer draw it up. You have to submit it to the state for approval, and then you're going to bring those documents into us for a permit. So we get them, and you've already expended money, but we get it. So then our fees are our impact fee, which is actually $1762.62. But the impact fee, then you have your heated square footage. And the heated square footage is done at 25 cents per heated square foot. So if you're building 2,000 square feet, multiply that by 25 cents, and that's what you're heated. Your unheated is 15 cents per square foot of unheated space. Then you have a certificate of occupancy, which is $50. You have a technology fee, which is $20, and that technology fee helps offset the cost for our permit software. So that helps, again, not put the burden on every citizen in the county to pay for software if they're not buying permits or license. So we have the heated space, unheated space, certificate of occupancy, impact fee, technology fee. If it's in an overlay, there may be an additional fee, I think $100 for the review to make sure it meets all of that criteria. So those are the fees we charge. So that's how we get to ours. But when you're the private homeowner or you're a builder, by the time you get to us, you may have already expended several thousand. And then somewhere around, with the impact fee, somewhere around $2,500, something around that is generally what it costs. Our fees that we collect help offset our expenses of our department. Building is we help fund the general fund for that. Business license, land development, and zoning. If you're doing a code enforcement case, that's an expense on the county. That's all over. We don't collect fees for those. If you go to court and a citation is issued, that money doesn't come back to us. That goes through the court system.
So only $1762.62
is the impact fee. Yes, sir.
So that
yes.
only goes to the impact?
And that goes straight to the impact fee. It's not spent on anything else. It's in an earmarked buckets, and it can only be used in those earmarked buckets.
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
To bounce off Commissioner Sanders, do we know, are our fees competitive to other counties or other places?
And that's a really good question. We're actually looking at trying to update our fee services. There's some new programs that we are looking at that as we go throughout the day, hopefully I'll remember to touch on these, but they're new programs, because I want to let you go on break. I don't want to just keep talking, but we want to answer the questions. But our fees were assessed based on the cost that it takes for the department to facilitate that. And we generally look at our neighboring areas and what their fees are. But if you are in a county, let's just take Morgan County, who may not have many permits that they issue a year, their fee may be able to be much smaller. But when we're issuing over 1,400 building permits last year, not all new residential, I got numbers for you, but 1,400 permits, our cost to facilitate that is higher than if you've only issued 200 for the whole year. So our fees are based on the cost of our services. But we do try to look at our neighbors, because sometimes people will compare that. And they have the right to compare that. I will say sometimes we follow up and find out if it's true. And I could say, I could put some in both hands. Yes, it was true, or no, it wasn't true.
So, and I know we have to work break, I'm sorry, but I just want to ask this question. So when a developer is thinking about coming to Newton County, they gonna look at our impact fees compared to other places?
Okay, so, and we'll talk about our players, and I'm not using that, but we have different people or different players in the thing. So sometimes a developer and a builder is used interchangeably. But generally, a developer is the one that comes in and does all the groundwork, puts in your streets, puts in your amenities package. Generally, that's your developer. Your builder is the one who comes in and gets that building permit. And I will tell you, even if most of your tract builders or I think the people that it probably impacts the most or shocks the most are the average citizen just coming in to build a house on their private property, because maybe they weren't prepared for that. But builders, they're prepared for it. They don't bat an eye. They'll give you their credit card just as quick. I mean, because they take that and turn that back into the cost of that home. And then that is then, yes. So did that help answer the question?
All right. Thank you all for being so patient, and hopefully you got a lot of your questions answered, and we'll have more opportunity. I asked Judy, she afford a 15-minute break, knowing how much more she has to cover, and she said yes. So 15 minutes from now, let's reconvene. Will you pick up on zoning at that point?
Yes, ma'am. We'll go right to the next, our next module.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So, what time do you have?
10:29.
2:30.